All right. Welcome to the State of the Nation. My name is Henry Sally. We are delighted to have all of you here today, this afternoon, this morning, depending on where you are in the world. Before I start, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. That acknowledgement is important because we work on indigenous land, and until we acknowledge that this land is not our land, this land is just an opportunity for us to work in collaboration with each and everyone else, to work in harmony with this land, to nurture it, then we cannot have proper reconciliation with the indigenous peoples of this land. I hope each and every indigenous people, wherever you are, whichever land you occupy, whichever land you nurture, I hope you have the opportunity to have this conversation. Thank you so much for following us, and
this is the State of the Nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The State of the Nation with Henry Sally.
All right. Again, thank you so much for following us. This is a conversation that is going to involve most of the people that you already know, but also new entrants who are not very new to your eyes. Dr. Stella is back in the fold. We're excited to have her back. She's going to tell us where she has been and what she has been up to. Of course, my good friend, Mr. Mitala Muzukuru wa Mswangali is in the house as well, and he will be telling you what's going on and why he's excited to be here. George Willowbo will be joining us shortly. He's running some errands that haven't ended yet, so he will be joining us shortly. We are supposed to have a new entrant, Mr. Tamale Mirundi Jr., Joseph Jr. Tamale Mirundi Joseph Jr. But of course, he's still having trouble, I think, with the connection. Naye nga tugenda gaba wanga ya mugalabye, wanga ya mugategedde, ebifa mugwanga. Of course, we are still interrogating the topic of COVID-19, how it has affected our people, how it has affected your people. And with that, I want to send my sincere condolences to each and every one, to all the families that have lost their loved ones, both abroad and back home. Mwena abafiiriddwako abantu bammwe tutuusa okusaasira kwaffe gye muli, tubasabira Mukama abagumye, era tusuubira nti nno Mukama gy'atuwa amagezi ag'okuyita mu kiseera kino ekizibu. Of course, COVID-19 is the biggest issue right now. How it has been handled, how it has been administered by our government, the official government, but also how is the opposition performing, specifically since the lockdown, the 42-day lockdown. Baganda bafa banupu bakola batya, ataba FDC, ataba DP. What are the options? What are some of the alternatives they have? Do they have any alternatives? Donations. There's many donations that have been given to Uganda to manage, to administer the COVID-19 pandemic. How has that money been used? Ziyambye zitya abantu baffe? Zibayambye oba tezibayambye? Gavumenti erina ntegeka ki okulaba nti abantu baffe, baganda baffe, bannyinaffe, bamama baffe, bajjajja baffe, basenga baffe babeera bulungi oba beetegekera ekirwadde kino? Saze mpenda ki okulaba nti nno abantu baffe tebafanga mpomboze? Regarding the lost COVID-19 donations, where is that money? Who has been administering it? How have they administered it? These are all questions that most of you have. What about the donation that was given by Mr. Ham? How about that? How was it handled? Was it given in good faith? What is it going to do? Ebibuuzo byonna mubadde mubimbuuza all the time. I'll ask the experts. Nja kubuuza abamanyi batubuulire. Nja kubabuuza. Nyera kubabuuza bali wano bagenda kubabuulira kiki ekigenda mu maaso. Of course, other people are meant to join us. Hopefully they will join us. We shall see how things evolve. Mukasera kano, I'm going to invite my friend Muzukulu wa Muswangali Mitala. Muzukulu wa Muswangali, please introduce yourself. Welcome to the State of the Nation.
Yes, of course, Henry. Thank you very much. As usual, I welcome to everyone who is following us and those who have consistently been part of this journey since we launched ourselves here as several months ago. For me, as I always say, it's a very beautiful pleasure to be here and be able to deliberate on a number of issues, share with friends knowledge and experience, across different things. It's an absolute pleasure, and I think we need to applaud Henry for taking the initiative to provide a platform of this kind for us to be able to have these interactions. By way of introduction, without wasting too much time, Julius Mitala. I prefer to go by the name Mitala Muzukulu wa Muswangali. I don't want to labor again to explain what that means. In simple terms, it's a recognition of my grandfather, George William Nyika Muswangali of Salama Road, the man who raised me, whom I owe a lot of credit, for all the influences he's had on me, growing up and up to the point where I am as a fully grown man. Professionally, I'm a trained lawyer. I live in the UK. But I am an ardent follower of all events, current affairs as they do unfold on a day-to-day basis across the globe, with a particular interest in what's taking place in our motherland, Uganda, because we all have an interest in making sure that, we influence governance and making sure that the country goes in a direction that works for everybody, where nobody gets to be left behind. So I look forward as usual, and it's very beautiful to see Dr. Stella Nyazi back with us. I hope this is going to be another intriguing and interesting, exchange, especially so that now she's not hindered by the experience of having, a bad internet connection. So we are going to be able to cover a lot of ground for this Sunday afternoon. Thank you very much, Henry. Looking forward for the exchanges.
I hope you're not raising the bar too high. Of course, we're excited to see Dr. Stella back in the fold. People missed you. We missed the conversations that you offer, the value you add on these conversations. Of course, you're going to tell us where you have been, what happened. You suddenly got lost, and of course, your input has been missing in action. Now that you are back in action, Chichicho Gambe Gwanga, Dr. Stella, Chichicho Gambe Gwanga. Welcome aboard. Please welcome back. Tell us what's going on and what's up. Who is Dr. Stella and where has she been all this time?
Right. Thank you very much, Henry. It's a pleasure to return to sit in the presence of both yourself and Muzukulu wa Muswangali. I missed you guys. I really did. So just to say very briefly that by way of introduction to those who don't know me, my name is Stella Nyanzi. I'm a medical anthropologist. I'm also a politician who contested in Uganda's last general elections for Kampala Member of Parliament on the FDC opposition party ticket. Currently, I'm in Berlin. Well, I'm in Munich in Germany, enjoying access to stable internet. I think I celebrate Henry and this panel for really opening an opportunity for me to be and to remain in touch with Uganda. The idea that we sit and discuss what's happening in Uganda on a weekly basis is important for those of us whose heart beats for Uganda even when we are away. And so, Henry, I want to say that for me, I never understood the challenge that you face as a panel organizer when you invite Ugandans in Uganda to participate. But the little time I was in Uganda, I just want to tell people who are tuned in that Henry facilitated me with some money to get one of the most expensive online packages so that I'd be able to appear every Sunday. Now, I'll tell you what, sometimes I had logged, electricity disappeared. Then on other days when we had electricity and the internet, I would get jammed. Then on other days, I mean, there was this and this and that structural challenges to any Ugandan of means, because Henry had actually provided me with money for a month's subscription to one of the best internet providers. But every week I failed. And I wasn't failed by time or anything. I was failed by internet, by data, by tax, by electricity, by on and on and on. So there's so many structural challenges in Uganda that deny Ugandans the opportunity to participate meaningfully in these conversations. And so, Henry, today I want to appreciate that you have been reaching out to Ugandans in Uganda, as well as those of us in diaspora, to participate in these weekly State of the Nation panel discussions. But it's difficult. It's very difficult. When a country has a bad government, that is what happens. So we have a weekly panel, but pity children who have to study every day, attend online classes, depending on this sort of infrastructure of failed electricity, failed internet, excessive. Kakati OTT bamujjayo, tebali ku OTT, bali ku taxi mpya babagiyita batya? The Museveni extreme tax internet. I don't know, some new name. But it's a delight for me to be in the house of a friend in Munich and to participate, particularly on a topic for me that's really painful. It would be painful if Ugandans were dying and Ugandans were struggling to get vaccines and Ugandans were struggling to get oxygen. But if the government was working. But I think what's exciting today is we're going to talk about all those all those things happening in Uganda, and to look at what the authorities, the people in government are doing, because they are part of the curse of being a Ugandan and dealing with COVID-19 today. So thank you for having me back. I'm excited.
We are excited to have you back. Welcome back, and hopefully this is going to be a productive conversation. Of course, there's two gentlemen that are supposed to be joining us. Mr. George Willoughby, our other regular, who you will be meeting shortly, is going to be joining us shortly. Is in another meeting that he's been chairing. So as soon as it's done, he'll be joining us. We were expecting Mr. Tamale Mirundi Joseph Jr. To join us. Of course, he's joining us from Kampala. So I don't know why he hasn't been able to log on yet. But perhaps it's another OTT-like tax that is denying him the opportunity to discuss. If he's able to join us, of course, we shall include him in the conversation. I think our our goal is to include as many voices, specifically voices that are on the ground, if they can join us, discuss and have a meaningful conversation on how we can elevate both the people of Uganda, but also engage in these sometimes tough or controversial conversations that must be engaged in by all of us who love that country, who wish the best for it and for the people of Uganda. Of course, you know what's going on right now, the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a word that has been on our lips for the past 15 or 16 months since March 2020. It's a conversation that has been talked about both by the people in the diaspora, but also locally in Kampala. Of course, the first pandemic or the initial pandemic did not hit Ugandans as bad as this Delta variant has hit us, has hit our people. I know friends who have lost more than 6 or 7 people in 2 weeks, in 1 week. I know people who are complaining that private hospitals are cheating. They are robbing them of their land titles to release their loved ones' bodies. So imagine having a loved one who has suffered from COVID-19. You take them to a private hospital that you think is going to facilitate them well so that they can get back their lives. But then unfortunately they pass or they die. And in taking their remains back home, you have to give, to get away, you have to part with the land title because you cannot afford the monies that they're asking you for. Of course, the government was given a lot of money to facilitate COVID-19. As you know, these are conversations that we have had from people who have been following this conversation. Of course, some of them are experts in their fields. People like Dr. Kiza Besigye, he talked a lot about this. So without wasting any more time, why don't we start with a clip of Dr. Besigye talking about the donations we have had.
We borrowed last year nearly $2 billion that we borrowed last year for COVID, which was over and beyond what was in the budget. This was for the emergency, borrowing from World Bank, borrowing from IMF, borrowing from here in the, Stanbic, borrowing domestically for supplies and so on. We borrowed nearly $2 billion. Where did it go? And we were looking and we were making noise. This is why I blame Ugandans more than even those who steal our money. Because we were making this noise, talking. But people are just docile. Nearly 1 trillion, 1,000 billion was taken to Mr. Museveni's home. And the country should demand. And it was said to be for secret work, classified expenditure. It's on record, it's in records of Parliament. But we are in the middle of a pandemic. Doctors don't have protective equipment. There is no oxygen in the hospitals. Doctors are not being paid their allowances. The doctors are very few. But you have taken 1,000 billion. Ugandans are starving. Only 59 billion was given to buy food. 59 billion to buy food for starving Ugandans. 1,000 billion is taken to the home for secret work. What secret work?
What secret work? What secret work? Of course, it's not just Dr. Besigye highlighting these gaps. or these discrepancies in how the COVID money has been used. It's even members of parliament. They have been questioning, how was that money used? So here's one of the conversations that the people in parliament had.
Shuka nakakulirwa mubaka wa Bugweri Abudu Katuntu leero mu butongole katandise okusinkana ebitongole bya gavumenti ku nkwata y'ensimbi ez'ekirwadde kya ssennyiga corona era katandise na kusinkana kuli ekitongole kigula n'okusaasanya eddagala mu malwaliro ga gavumenti National Medical Stores Moses Kamabale ne minisita w'ebyensimbi Matia Kasaija. Akulira National Medical Stores Moses Kamabale abuuziddwa akakiiko obutegevu bw'ekitongole kye okugula eddagala n'ebikozesebwa ebyekuusa ku ssennyiga corona kyokka bwe gutuuse ku nsimbi ezaagerekebwa okugula eddagala erigema ssennyiga corona ne gujabagira. Ku nkomerero y'omwaka oguwedde olukiiko lw'eggwanga olukulu lwayisa embalirira y'ennyongereza ya bombi 18.5 okugulira bannayuganda eddagala erigema ssennyiga corona nga mu mateeka ekitongole kino kye kyalina okuligula kyokka ababaka kibabuuseeko akulira ekitongole kino bw'ategeezeza nti ensimbi zino tazirabangako era n'eddagala lyonna erigema ssennyiga corona Uganda lyekozesa livudde mbagabirizi ba buyambi.
All the vaccines that we have received in our country, they do not include any one vaccine, any one dose that has been bought by government of Uganda money. All of it so far has been donations.
Now the question that follows is the money we received last year, where is the money?
Honorable Chair, the money was not voted on anyways, and I am constrained to answer that.
Oluvannyuma kitegeerekeze nti ensimbi zino mu kifo ky'okugenda mu National Medical Stores ate minisitule y'ebyobulamu yazimaamira era ababaka babuuzizza minisita Kasaija anyonyole oba ddala kituufu ensimbi obumbi 18.5 baabuwa minisitule y'ebyobulamu mu kifo kya National Medical Stores okugula eddagala. Minisita ategeeza nti alina kusooka kuddayo ayongere okwetegereza.
Who is messing up the Ugandans? Because this is suicide. This is genocide. Someone is committing genocide. People are dying in the hospitals. Someone is sitting on the money, which we passed so many months ago, and we don't have any vaccines.
The issue is to get vaccines, whether it is through NMS or through the Ministry of Health.
No, did you release the money?
No. We have not released the money at all.
For
quarter one.
For vaccine last time.
The last time?
Yes.
I will need to check on that one. I don't know whether it was. Yes.
That is the Minister of Finance. He has to check on someone else to figure out which money is where. That's the Minister of Finance. But that conversation is not over. Of course, it proceeds into the most recent clip or the most recent conversation in Parliament, which is this one.
We collected money here. Ugandans are very generous people. You people ate the money. Where is the money? We collected over 29 billion. We collected the cars. We donated to everything. You ate the money. I don't know. I'm a new member of Parliament. I don't know Madam, a person called Atwine. I don't know her. We want Madam Atwine to tell us, where is our money we collected in Uganda here? I don't know her. Yeah? We collected money Ugandans and gave to the ministry. Where is our money? I hear this madam called Atwine. I don't know who she is. She should tell us where is our money.
Dr. Stella, where is our money? Where is our money, Dr. Stella? Where is our money? Please tell us where you think our money is. Do you think Ugandans' accusations of Dr. Twine, because Dr. Twine has actually become the face of the mismanaged finances, but is it justified? Are those accusations justified? Of course, I think you have all been following this. There's another clip that I'll be sharing later on. But I'm just wondering, because at some point, Dr. Twine herself implicated, got herself implicated when you had a conversation with Mr. Museveni about the beds. When Mr. Museveni asked him about the beds, where are the beds? Apparently, the president told her to procure over 42,000 beds, and only 3,000, I think, were procured.
At a regional referral hospital.
How many beds do you have total in your mind? Total, because I told you 42,000.
We have about 3,000 beds.
Now you can see. That's why they didn't listen to my Ujemu. Onumujemu. So that's why the problem is. Kari, young woman.
Should we exonerate Mr. Museveni? Dr. Stella.
Right. So Henry, I think for me that the question of public accountability, or the question of accounting to Ugandans for debt incurred on our behalf, loans taken in the names of Ugandans, because I don't think that the IMF and other bilateral donors are giving money to individuals in Uganda. They are giving money to people who are acting on our behalf, trusted to be taking care of the public treasury, the public purse, to procure what is important to sustain the lives of Ugandans, to put away the COVID-19 virus, and to secure our lives, secure our future as Ugandans. So I think for me that the questions around Permanent Secretary Dr. Diana Atwine are important questions. And I think that the first thing we should do is not to look at her as an individual, as a person, as a private person, but as a public actor acting as the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health. And I think that there have been two women. As a woman, I want to say there have been two women at the forefront of the COVID-19 fight in Uganda, Dr. Diana Atwine and Dr. Jane Ruth Acheng. And many people have celebrated the strengths of these women. I don't want to dismiss the good things they have done in terms of organizing and teaching and doing whatever else. But as a woman, I want to register my disappointment, my deep disappointment at the dishonesty, the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability, the failure to even be shameful or remorseful for this lack of accountability in the ways that money that has publicly been allocated for procurement of vaccines, procurement of beds, procurement of oxygen, procurement of PPE, masks, and whatever else doctors need, those hazmat, the overalls, which are very similar to paper overalls, but this time are white. That these are essential, not just for the functioning of the public health system, but for the lives of Ugandans. Diana Atwine and those others she represents in the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Public Finance. Is it the Ministry of Finance? What's the Ministry of Finance called? The Ministry of Finance and what?
But
there's a name for that ministry, right? That all those public officials who are implicated in this particular crisis are really responsible for the lives of Ugandans, because a missing bed, a missing cylinder, just one cylinder of oxygen could have saved that Ugandan who died today. And I think for me that questions around public accountability are very serious. They are no longer questions about someone missing aspirin or electricity missing from a theater, because those are important, but this is critical that those missing ICU beds mean that Ugandans who need critical care are dying. Okay, the failure to properly account and spend and utilize this public money in honest ways, in frugal ways, means that the coffins are increasing, and we don't want that to happen. So questions around public transparency have dire implications. Many times women are believed to be frugal and economical and honest and transparent and very good at accounting for finances. However, in this case, my sister has proven herself to be a dry-eyed thief. And when I say my sister, I don't just speak about Diana. I speak about the whole enterprise. It's a whole magendo business ya magendo gali yawo bali mu kibba kya ssente bagiyita COVID cash bonanza. There's a cash bonanza happening around COVID-19, and I think for me that whether she's a woman or a human, she's a public figure. And Diana Atwine represents the shameless, thieving public officials we have in Uganda. Many have come into office because they're relatives or friends of Yoweri Museveni. We know for a fact that Diana got her job through nepotism. She's a relative to the first family. And I'm one of those who believe that relationship to a person in power does not necessarily exclude one from coming to the table. If one comes to the table and shows their expertise and shows their ability to manage an office, if Diana had come to be permanent secretary in this crisis and shown that instead of building huge malls and huge kalinas, whose source of money we don't know, she's been accountable to the people of Uganda. She's shown Nabanja has done something very silly, but at least Nabanja for money. What does Diana have to show using all the billions that we've had from people such as Chiza Besigye and the different members of parliament who are asking for accountability? But also after a year, look, the money that was borrowed was first borrowed in 2020. I think what Henry underscored when we were starting is that the crisis in 2020 for Uganda was not as severe as it has been. We had a whole year to utilize this money meaningfully and invest in infrastructure, in medicines, in systems, in health and human resources that would have helped alleviate the crisis of COVID-19. Also, I think we had ample time to set up accountability systems. People who say we received X billion or X thousand USD to buy tents. Okay, you had the saga of the tents that went, the wind blew away tents that were bought to create isolation centers for patients. And I think that the 1 year was giving us time not only to strengthen our health systems, but also to strengthen our accountability systems. Procurement money is requested for, it is disbursed, we spend, we show what we bought, and we give accountability to Ugandans, but also to those who've given us money. I think before we criticize Diana Atwine, we should also criticize the donors who are giving us money. I want to say that the laxity of our donors, the laxity of our funders, allows the Diana Atwines of today to just know they will steal money, and no one is expecting accountability from them. Before we blame Yoweri Museveni, we should blame those who are enabling him and his regime. And so I've kind of thrown out a few ideas which I think are good to start thinking through. And I haven't been gentle because I don't think it's time for us to be gentle around people who are building mega structures when Ugandans are dying simply because they are gasping for missing air. There's missing oxygen and someone dies, but somebody has another floor of a mall, you know, using the money that would have bought oxygen. That's serious, Henry. It's very serious. Henry, please unmute yourself.
Yes. Oh yes. I think it's also fair to highlight the fact that it's not just those ones that are in power that are showing up. There are other that are mega buildings, but also that some of our folks in the opposition are also showing up beautiful mega buildings. But I want to hear what Mr. Mittal has to say about this conversation.
Thank you very much, Henry. Very interesting times, really. And I also want to take the perception that Stella has taken to say that I don't want to criticize individual, persons, because obviously, personally, I don't know the woman very well. I don't know any of these people in their individual capacities. I can only approach this subject from the point of view of somebody who is sat in a public space, somebody who is occupying public office, and they are trustees. They are entrusted with certain powers, to be able to carry out some functions. but in carrying out of those functions, they are expected to be transparent and honest, and also, account to the people, to whom, they hold those office on behalf of. So there's quite a number of issues. But I've been reading an article this morning. Actually, it's an article that was written in the Daily Monitor by a very credible writer here. This is Mr. Daniel Kalinachi. He writes in the Daily Monitor on the 8th of July, and he says that a robbery has just happened in front of us, but no one seems to have seen it. And I think that kind of summarizes exactly where we are. Something peculiar, did take place. I've been thinking about a number of things there. This concept of enjawulo, making a difference. It's a corrupt kind of thing, to be honest. I think if we call a spade by a spade, it's corruption in its typical sense. But there's always this idea of people abantu okwagala okulya enjawulo, okukola sente ez'amangu, quick money, making a quick dash for cash. There's always that problem. And historically, traditionally, how this kind of concept has manifested itself. I mean, you've heard about stories where people go maybe to buy cement. Maybe you are doing your personal private constructions in a village somewhere, putting up a small roof over the head of your children or your extended family. You go to buy a number of bags of cement, only to be given cement that is mixed with something else. Or if not, those who are engaged in farming, animal husbandry, stuff like that, you go to buy animal feeds, only to buy animal feeds that have been mixed with something else, and the damage in the end tends to be that all your produce gets destroyed or gets damaged, or you engage a veterinary officer to come and do some kind of vaccination on your animals, and he ends up giving them the wrong medication, and at the end of the day everything loses value. So there is that moral degeneration. It's really it's painful to even narrate. It's painful to explain, because it's just what it is. But as long as we as a people, as a nation, that compassion for others, to put ourselves in the shoes of another person who's going through a bad experience, and to have empathy with them, and have that compassion, as long as that grand idea has kind of disappeared from us as human beings. This is why you see the sorts of things that we are seeing, that people are doing things, people are stealing from the national coffers, and they know deep inside them, deep in their hearts, they know that the sorts of things that they are doing are wrong, but everything else doesn't care. What matters for them is the instant cash flow that's available to them to go and enrich themselves, drive expensive cars, put up buildings, buy nice clothes and nice handphones and nice masks and so on and so forth. And the rest of the lives of the common Ugandans doesn't seem to matter really. And I think that's really, really very painful to watch. The Attorney General has, not the Attorney General, but I think it's the Inspector General of Government, the Inspectorate of Government has been very precise in pointing out at some of the deficits, in some government, departments where there is no accountability for funds. And the question now we are asking, where did this money go? I think it's now the $1 million question. Where did actually this money go? Because it didn't disappear was it taken in sacks? Okay, the CJ tells us that money was taken to the president's, residency, and it was dished out. Possibly it was used, for the electioneering period that we went through, because we saw lots of money flying about. So, but how do these things happen? In the environment where we are, how do these things happen? And all of us seem to be kind of there's a zip on people's mouths that nobody can really say, can point out that this what's happening in the country is wrong. It's a shame. I think for me, I'm really at pains to narrate this whole story.
Where did this money go?
I want to summarize it like this, and I think again Timothy Kalyejira has made a very good point there. He says that living in Uganda today is just like walking down, a crowded Owino market, where at every turn you are worried that somebody's gonna ditch a hand in your pockets and grab something nice from you, but then you are likely to be accused as being the thief, and then in the end you are the one who gets castrated, you are the one who was at risk. You, the victim, you are the one who is at risk of actually being pounced on by the gang, whereas actually the thugs are there. So the thugs are known. The people who have stolen this money have known. The names have been thrown about. It's pathetic. It is scandalous, and I think these sorts of things needs to be called out. By name. They need to be called out by name. One of the ways I think the public can possibly, and I don't know if we have a lawyer who is very serious with this kind of enterprises, Marema Bilizi. I mean, for all his other issues, I don't want to go into that, but I think Marema Bilizi could be of some help here. We have the Freedom of Information Act 2005 in Uganda. It enables Ugandans, the public, whoever. You don't have anybody. You can request for this information. I think this is public information. It's available in Parliament. The Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning is the public body. They are functioning as a public body. The public is entitled to know, the structures under which these monies have been siphoned out, who was given what, where did it go, where's the accountability, what happened. During the last period, during the last financial year, during that budget that was produced during the pandemic, there were no foreign trips for ministers. There were no foreign trips for any government officials. There were no cars that were bought, new cars for government, whatever, nothing like that was bought. So there was a lot of cutting back on the pretext that we were putting together a fund to help people through a crisis. And what we ended up with was, there's been no package whatsoever to assist people. I mean, think about businesses, people who have got businesses, and they took the bullet by not laying off their employees, trying to preserve jobs. And they were promised help, and nothing came through. So there's all these measures, these things that have been expected to be taking place. And on the other hand, though people always talk about the deep state, and I think there has never been a time like this to begin really to understand what deep state means. I think the concept, the idea relates to a clique of people who have taken over government, and they manipulate all government systems and processes for the benefit of themselves and not for the benefit of the public good.
When you say gangs or mafias, are you exonerating Atwine? Because I know Atwine is responsible. She's in a position to track all this money. That's why everyone else is pretty much making her the scapegoat, including the president of the Republic of Uganda, because he referred to her as one of the Bajemu. In the last clip I shared, of course, she couldn't make accountability for the 42,000 beds that she was asked to procure for the hospitals. And ICU. These are ICU beds. For me, what Dr. Stella was talking about.
I worry. I wonder whether these people really think about posterity, how they are going to be remembered. I mean, maybe that might not matter, because obviously by the time somebody goes out to do the sorts of things that people are doing, it's quite possible they don't even care how history will remember them, because obviously they see themselves as the saviors, they see themselves as the cream of the creed, and therefore they are doing Ugandans a favor, so they don't owe them an explanation. Under normal circumstances, when a
reference to mafiaism, what exactly do you mean by that?
What there is a deep state, and some of these names have been thrown about. Yeah, I mean, typical example here: allegations have been made against Dr. Atwine that money has disappeared on her watch. Really, if she cared about her reputation, if she cared about professional expertise and standing in the eyes of the public, this would be the right time for her to come up and clarify on some of those things. But by the
she has come out occasionally. She has come out.
What I've seen her say is that she's been pleading for the public to love her, That's what I've seen. As I think what I saw very briefly from one of the clips or one of the interviews that have been attributed to her, she was blaming the people, that the people are not grateful in spite all that has been done for them. But that still remains to be seen. What has been done for them that people should be grateful for? But that's all I saw. And for me, I think that's not good enough. It's not a good enough performance. I think we have to take these things quite seriously. People need to look at their positions in a manner that as serious as the positions themselves, and stand up with straight faces and account to the country and to the public and tell them that, guys, we've had a problem. The pandemic has been here. We were given this amount of money. This is what we got, and this is what we are not able to get, and this is what we expect to do. But all that is missing at the moment, and I think it's a terrible indictment, for all those people who are holding those positions.
Dr. Stella, can we separate the person from the entity? Can we separate the person of Atwine from the entity that she leads, where she's supposed to be the accountant to that money that was given out in regards to administering COVID-19, specifically after having seen that last clip where the president refers to her as Omjem? And why is she still serving after being referred to as Omjem by the head of the state?
Right. So Henry, I think for me that like I said, I do not attack or confront Diana Atwine and any other minister or person acting in public office as individuals. I confront them and criticize them quite severely because of the public office they hold.
Yeah, now, how do we separate
Diana Atwine does not work alone. You're talking about Ministry of Health. I want to talk about the entire ecology or economy of accountability in Uganda. Okay.
So in other words,
put Diana Atwine to the side. Let us say like Muzukulu wa Muswangali just said, she doesn't care about Ugandans. She doesn't give a damn because she's not going to get sick. And when she gets sick, she can afford to fly to Germany or London or wherever. Okay. Diana Simwe tatufa, because the pain of the poor Ugandan is not her pain. I think that in Uganda, we have a number of institutions that have been, their teeth have been knocked out. We have, the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. I looked it up. It's Finance, Planning, Economic Development. Before money is released, these people are the ones who are taking care and looking at the budget as it's coming when it's been approved. The budget allocations, remember in Parliament that the members of Parliament from the opposition queried Matia Kasaija and say to him, what happened to the money that was allocated for vaccines? And he said, it never went to national medical stores. And he said, did you give it to Ministry of Health? And he said, I don't know. And so Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development should put to task Ministry of Health and say the money that Diana Atwine was supposed to get from medical stores or oversee that it went to medical stores to buy vaccines for Ugandans did not get there. Ministry of Finance should ask questions. But over and above that, I think there's a leadership crisis, a severe leadership crisis in Uganda. In the president's office, we have the Ministry of Ethics and Integrity. Are totally impotent. If it was fucking, the Ministry of Ethics and Integrity is like a man without balls, a man with a penis, but he cannot erect. What are they doing in terms of ethics and integrity and questioning people? There's this new institution in the president's office headed by Edith Nakalema. Okay, apparently Edith Nakalema is in charge of what? Looking at corruption, stealing public funds. What I saw Edith Nakalema doing was going to the taxi park when children were released suddenly from school and trying to provide buses. She even failed to provide buses for children. But in terms of accounting, what has she done to follow this money up? When Yoweri Museveni, the so-called president of Uganda, asked Diana Atwine during National Prayer Day, standing before God, he said, I gave you money for 42,000 beds. She says, we got 3,000 beds. Nakalema, praise the Lord. She's a hallelujah Bible pumping sister. She should have listened to that. taken it down and followed that money. Where did the money for the beds go? So there are all these institutions around integrity, ethics, morality. I think that Muzukuru wa Muswangali told us that Ugandans have lost compassion and the ability to think about those who are suffering. And I think that the crisis at first is leadership and managerial and administrative, and it begins, in Uganda we say ekyennyanja kiduda kuba mu mutwe, engege esooka ddudwa kitwe kino, n'akasolo k'abasajja kasooka kududa ku kitwe. Yimbye. But my point is, away from being vulgar, that if the head of state is rotten, that is why the Diana Asimwes can steal public funds and get away. But I also wanted to talk about the Auditor General, the Uganda Revenue Authority, Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Authority, the Ministry of Public Service, Uganda Investments Authority, Public Sector Foundation, all these, Uganda Financial Intelligence Authority. There are so many authorities in Uganda that are supposed to record. When Diana Atwine bought land and began bringing in cement and began bringing in pillars, the pillars that built her mall, wherever that mall is, people should be tracking these things. The banks should know how much money is on her account, how much money she's taking out, how much money she's paying with mobile money to her builders or whatever. And that money measured, and this is Diana Atwine and all other public figures.
I know, but here's the thing, because someone would ask you a question then, that why are we so interested in Atwine right now when the Minister of Finance, Mr. Matia Kasaija, during elections, hired someone who was running against him to drop and eventually dropped out of that campaign.
Yes, but then Henry, I just said to you that it's a whole ecology of thieves. It's a whole community of thieves. It's a whole fellowship of thieves. It's the mafia system that Muzukuru wa Muswangali was referring to. A thief does not steal alone in Uganda. There's a whole gang of thieves, okay? And I think Kalina Ki's title about robbery happened in broad daylight. They have been stealing from us. I think that what COVID-19 did was to amplify and make very visible what has been happening for the last few decades. And I think it is terrible because Diana Atwine, for me, is one out of thousands, okay? Talia Yeka. I think the term okulya enjawulo was introduced, and I think for me si kulya enjawulo, bano banyazi balira ddala kyonna si enjawulo, tebawuzaako bwawuzika. They're not just taking a small bit out of the cake, they're taking the whole cake and even the plate and the oven that baked the cake, right? And I think for me that to penalize just Diana Atwine, she has issues. There are issues around accountability. I think for her, for us Ugandans, she's the easiest target. Very similar to what Edith Nakalema does, that Edith Nakalema goes for the small fish. We should go after Yoweri Museveni. I have heard and watched a number of videos of human rights activists demanding for the resignation of Diana Atwine. In my case, I would demand for the resignation of the entire government for never resigning. Okay? Right? Maybe.
But you know, Stella,
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you say, and I think you elaborate this issue very, very well to say that it's a network. It's a network of people. But I think what we are lacking, and I think this is a problem that has continuously been said, and I've said it myself, that I think in Uganda, until when we resolve the issue of leadership, all these problems can never go away, because we have a president, despite his public pronouncements, his actual, his actions, they speak louder than what he actually says. I'll give you an example. Very recently, we had a lady, and I'm at liberty to mention this name because, again, this is public information. We had this lady who was nominated as minister, and she went to Parliament to be vetted, and Parliament refused to take her through because of her record in the past, a criminal record. she was given a fine of 20, which is laughable actually, considering the amounts of money that we have stolen during the the AIDS funds that I think it's the Gavi funds or something like that disappeared, and she had a very clear hand to play in that, and the court made a pronouncement on that, whereupon she was convicted and given a fine of she was made to pay a fine of 20 million pounds, to rather 20 million Ugandan shillings, so she's been nominated now, proposed as a minister, brought back to Parliament. The Parliament, using its parliamentary oversight, refused to process her nomination, and then things happened. And this is exactly what I mean when I say the deep state. If you don't see the deep state, this is where the deep state functions. Because if Parliament, as an independent organization, decides that we are not going to take a certain course of action, and then a few days later, or maybe a few weeks later, hands are pulled, from behind, and then the same name is forwarded back to Parliament, and this time it passes. What has changed? The question that will be asked, what has changed today? What new information has come to light today that was not available on the last occasion, that renders her now fit to hold the public office, where there's been questions about credibility and standing as a person? So there is those sorts of issues. But the head of the government, the person who is at the helm of our establishments, doesn't really take these matters to be the serious scandals that they are. He's prepared to look away as long as what he wants is going in his direction. Certain other things he can close an eye and things can get away with it. Now, one of the other things that I want to mention is that obviously I'm happy to have very, very successful government ministers and very successful government officials. There is nothing that stops somebody from being successful simply because they work in government. I think if we were to take that approach, it would be quite a sad approach to take. But the question that is being raised, and I think this is why you're asking that, why are all eyes on a particular individual? Eyes are on a particular individual because in this instance, she's the face of the pandemic. She's the face of the government's pandemic response. But if the public is not satisfied that, sufficient effort has been taken to take care of an urgent situation, and then on her side, she's seemingly being seen to be making, very serious progress during a period that raises lots of questions. You cannot, we can't be criticizing people for asking questions of that kind, And this is what I said earlier, that I think the onus is on these people, if they really have something to say to the public, to come up and give the public an explanation that this is what we have done, this is what we have not been able to do, and this is what we are proposed to do, so that we can be able to bring back the confidence in the public that the system is working for them and it's just not working for some individuals. That's where the dilemma is for me.
So what should we tell the people out there who are listening to us, people who are on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Periscope, people who are watching us all over the world, even people in Kampala who cannot afford masks, for example, people who are starving right now because they are in lockdown? Of course, you're going to engage in that conversation next in regards to the Prime Minister's plan. What do you tell the person out there who knows that they are going to pay for this money for generations, because it was donations from International Monetary Fund, from the World Bank, from other organizations within the international community, but also money that was mobilized by Ugandans. How did the government use that money? And it is saying, does that exonerate the president from this racket of apparent thieves? Dr. Stein.
Right. So thank you. I think for me that one of the things that I think is important is to remind Ugandans that even though it's immediately after elections, it is still our responsibility to make our leaders responsible. Those organizations I was talking about that are responsible for making people accountable and for demanding accountability. If the system was working well, they would be working. But I think it is now our duty as citizens, as responsible people, to do whatever we can to bring the government to task. And so if the name that is being floated is Diana Twine and there are different actions, I know, for example, that people, human rights activists are organizing and calling people to have protest actions demanding for the resignation of Diana Twine and others. But I know that there are many people who are so discouraged, even just to take a photo of themselves saying Diana Twine must resign is impossible. And what I think I want to tell people is we are going to pay for this money for the next 50 years. If you don't pay, your child will pay for this debt that we are incurring. And because the debt is incurred in our names, there is nothing wrong with us becoming watchdogs over this money, making it very difficult for government officials to blatantly steal. They are no longer embarrassed to steal and build castles in our presence as we starve, people are writing to me to say, mpereza ya kawunga, kulabe n'abazungu ng'onywa bia, mpereza yeza kawunga, right? But I think for me that we have to stop whispering in the corridors. We have to stop being timid, because we are going to pay for this money. We may as well start calling out the thieves, taking public civil action that is peaceful. Of course, they will hit us and retaliate, but where we can name and shame, let us name and shame, and therefore make it difficult for the stealers of our public funds to continue stealing. I think for me that we need to organize, especially now in Uganda, politics organizes us around elections. But I think that even after in the post-election period is when we must, as the opposition, I think we have a huge task before us. And I want to perhaps salute leaders in the opposition. Dr. Kizza Besigye has been at the forefront quite a lot, but he can't do it alone. I see the leader of opposition in parliament and other MPs who are getting opportunities to speak are speaking out, but then the MPs and a few isolated leaders in the opposition parties that we belong to cannot be the only ones calling out. These people, religious leaders, have pulpits. These days they're online or on radio. Begin calling out people and saying, we want accountability for our money. Name the public officials who are buying land in the villages, for example, because they're buying the plots of land in the villages. They're building in our areas. Cultural leaders, like anybody who has leadership and authority and a platform should start. Musicians can sing songs shaming them. I've seen songs around Nabanja, Amabanja, Agajobanja. So we can begin also doing, like, creatives can begin working around the question of public accountability, because this is our money. It was taken in our name. It's being spent by others, but our children will pay for many years. So what I think is I'm calling people to action.
Yeah, do you think that public accountability includes the public? Was Dr. Besigye right in blaming the public, the Ugandan public, for being docile?
I think for me that more and more Dr. Kizza Besigye's message is around Ugandans, you're stupid, very stupid. Ugandans, you're lazy. Ugandans, you're weak. Ugandans, you are... And I think it comes from a very good place. It comes from a place of pain, having analyzed the struggle and realized that many times we are pushing the Henry Sallys to the forefront, and many of us are happy to sit and wait and say, hey, Bakozechi, what are they doing? What are they doing for us? And do I think that Dr. Kizza Besigye was right? I think we are echoing each other. I am saying we can't sit and wait. Okay?
We can't sit and wait.
We have to participate from whatever vantage point. I'm not saying go and dress like Stella Nyanzi does. Maybe your duty is to pray. Maybe your duty is to hold a piece of paper. Maybe your duty is to lobby. Maybe your duty is to sit on a panel. Maybe your duty, but do something. Do something. Do something. When you go to hospital and shit is happening in hospital, expose the shit. And I think we can't afford to sit back and wait, because COVID-19 is giving us an issue around which we can mobilize. All of us can mobilize It is about health, it's about life, it's about death, it's about closing an economy, it's about children not going to school. It touches women and men and generations old and young. It is an issue that can unite us. We don't even need to unite the opposition. We can unite Ugandans around this cause. I don't know why we're not doing it. Maybe we don't have enough community organizers, but COVID-19 is an issue that can unite all of Africa. We can have a whole protest across Africa demanding for vaccines.
It's very interesting that you're talking about protesting throughout Africa. I think this morning I was watching protests in Joburg, I think. South Africans protesting the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma. And ShopRites have been looted, seriously looted, because one of the former leaders was arrested and put to jail for the crimes that he committed while he was a leader. It is something that when you said do something, I think Ugandans need to hit that message, and I'm going to leverage that message and ask everyone who is following on YouTube to subscribe and follow us on those conversations as well. Mr. Mitamuswaga, what do you as we wrap up?
I agree with pretty much what Stella has to say, and I think that's dangerous. That we can all sit on this panel and seem to be agreeable on most of the things. So I think we need to have divergent views and divergent ideas, although we are all working for the same objective in the end. But I think to echo what Stella has just said, I think you can make a relationship in this context here that Ugandans have decided to settle for less. And I want to explain that a little bit more. Say, for example, whenever we go to the elections, whether they are elections for local councillors or MP elections or presidential elections, whenever we are in that time, Ugandans have become accustomed to this idea of people giving them, tokens of small objects like bags of sugar, maybe a T-shirt. In the recently concluded presidential elections, I saw a very famous face up north country who was delivering T-shirts, for a particular candidate, and people were receiving it, and they gave out their vote on the basis of a T-shirt, which in effect it's nothing. It cannot even change your life. And how many days a year are you going to wear that T-shirt and be comfortable with it? But what the point I'm trying to drive here is that Ugandans have become accustomed to settle for less. And I think this is what Dr. Besigye is criticizing, that if we really need to see, if we demand that we need the government and those who are in leadership to take us seriously, there is something that's extra that needs to be done. And that is not to say that we can follow the way things are done in South Africa, in rioting and looting and stuff like that. But there are other places we can take example from. I mean, I see protests here across so many different places. For instance, in Hong Kong, people of Hong Kong, they stand up in masses. And there's another country here recently where there was a military coup, and people of all walks of life, doctors, teachers, students, everybody, they came up to the street despite the bullets and water cannons that were deployed against them. But they were there saying to the state and the powers that be telling them, this is not what we want. We want things to be done in a different way. So I think what Besigye is saying to the people is that it's about time that people stop folding their hands and waiting for somebody else to take action on their behalf. Because ultimately, as you've seen in this COVID pandemic situation, the pandemic seems to be, affecting people who are less privileged, much more than people who are privileged. And what am I saying here? Henry, you and me maybe can afford to raise 3 million shillings, but there are people who are not in position to raise even 50,000 shillings to be able to take a relative or a loved one to hospital. Honorable Semjunganda was making an example here, and I heard other people making exactly the same analysis. People end up in hospital, but before the doctors even touch you, they are asking you to deposit 5 million shillings before they even touch you. And at that point, they are not even, it's not even clear whether you are suffering from COVID, whether you are suffering from any other condition. But before the doctors touch, before they admit you in a particular facility, you have got to deposit. You've got to deposit 5+ million shillings, before the process can start. Now you can imagine if you weigh up very quickly, how many average Ugandans are in position to raise, 5 million, 3 million shillings in order to deal with situations of such a kind? So when people come to you, these people we're referring to people who are in a deep state, the ones that Stella is referring to, those ones who are going and buying, acres and acres of land, I'm told that, they don't even wait to go to the bank. The moment the deal is being cut, somebody goes to the boot of their car, pulls out a sack of money, and deal is done and dusted, But I think there is lots of problems with that. But the issue is that people should demand for that accountability. People should demand that those who are holding offices on their behalf, they should be working, they actually, at least they should be seen to be working for the public other than working for themselves. And I think that's really the critical message I think Dr. Message is trying to push.
Thank you.
This is the state of the nation. Rifa Uganda. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Salah.
Of course, thank you so much for following us, following the conversation. This is the state of the nation as it has been expressed there. As we move on to the second segment of this conversation, of course, there is hope. There is hope that at least this time around, people are not going to have to suffer with bad beans or rotten posho to pretty much survive. There has been a ray of hope shined by the recent or new Prime Minister, Honorable Nabanja, who has said that, okay, so this time around, what we are going to do is we are going to send 100K. Tugenda basindikira buli emitwalo 10. Newankubadde nga yagambye the vulnerables. Of course, she did not tell us the metrics that they are using to decide who is vulnerable and who isn't. Of course, I want to welcome Mr. George Willoughby to the conversation. Welcome, Mr. Willoughby. Of course, we have missed you in the last hour. I hope your meeting went well. Tell the people where you have been hiding and tell us if this ray of hope is actually going to work. People who is a vulnerable? First of all, define who is a vulnerable, and have people started getting this money? Unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Henry. It's a pleasure being in this platform, and it's a pleasure also having Stella, Dr. Stella, with us today. And it's really a pleasure also having my brother, Mitala. I don't know how to pronounce the other name though, but I'll be learning slowly. So apparently, it's really something that in Uganda, you're looking at a state that is run like a company, where the CEO wakes up and says, all employees, you're going to stay home because of A, B, C, D. And all of a sudden, someone comes up with their own opinion and own detail that they want certain approaches to be done without any familiar consultations that were done. If you asked me that who is a vulnerable person in this current state of emergency, everyone becomes a vulnerable person in one way or the other. And by virtue of limiting people's incomes, and with the alarming COVID-19 pandemic surge, and also having people indoor for all this while, but also without any secure lines of access to most of their livelihoods. It's very, very sad that our own leaders do not know that people become vulnerable at a given point. Vulnerability does not necessarily mean having money in your pocket. You can be vulnerable to disease. You can be vulnerable to a situation. So actually, there was no methodology that was that is really concrete that was used in terms of identifying some of these people. Much as you will look at somebody called a border man, and then you say border man is vulnerable. It's absurd how our leaders treat serious issues of the society, and you would wonder whether we are going to have a state where people are considered based on a particular form of approach, where people are reached out to, where people are consulted, where you have a whole spine. Because you see, how state operates, state is a very big operation where you have a single spine of the state that can go up to the deepest part of the community. But where you have our leaders ignoring that entire state apparatus of resource of so many people who are leaders at different levels, to only make up dictations of judgments, of decisions, simply because of their feeling and because of how they think it's absurd. Now, statistics has it that if these people recently did the census, Uganda, the census, it would be very easy for the PM office, the Prime Minister's office, to actually access a lot of household statistics from UBOS. Now, lack of that means that Uganda operates also like the ordinary person, hand to mouth, where they do not even have the records that shows how many households that they have in the country. They do not have how many people whom they feel do not have household incomes that they can actually use as a backbench for their kind of methodology to reach out for this, to access this little money. They do not have any sort of statistics that they can access from the many different levels and forms of institutions. If you're taking teachers, for example, how many schools do we have in Uganda for that matter? There are so many private and government institutions that have teachers in their payrolls, and they have the number that are also private in those payrolls. So they can easily give you that. And these are all schools that are verified and certified by the Ministry of Education. If you come to all these other LOCs, they have so much information with regards to household situations. And when you lock out all those players and partners of planning, you will not have any plan at all, because the plan will not be inclusive, but rather it is only having a state of opinions of different people that sit at in an office and come out with very unlikely kind of decisions that we are seeing. However, the point I am trying to drive is that these leaders needed to have a methodology. If only the Madam Nabanja had a methodology that they can present to Ugandans and say, look, this is how we arrived at this point of considering this person as vulnerable or not. Because these days people have more than 5 contacts. So how are you reaching out to know that this person is vulnerable or not? How are you considering that? There are so many households that were not registered. Even the methodology, when they tried to engage some of the community leaders, they just walk in and pass in. And some of these people needed to have all the statistics, including the statistics that they used to distribute posho in the previous wave. Where are all these statistics, and who is holding them captive, and for what reasons is something that we must interrogate as a country. But yeah, as you know,
you're asking very, very important questions. And I think you're talking about tracking. We are in a pandemic where the government has failed to administer testing or even to track, to clearly track who has been immunized, who has had the first jab, how many people have had 2 jabs, for example, who is really dying in ICU. We don't know if there's tracking for people who are dying in the villages, who haven't accessed, who haven't gone to the hospitals to be tracked. And now you're telling them that they should have used all those infrastructures, which we hope they do have. For example, the infrastructure that they used during the first wave in distributing the posho and beans to people, the food to beans, the posho and beans to the people. Do you think you're asking too much to the office of the Prime Minister?
Is that question to me? I think, what do you expect? The office of the Prime Minister is in charge of government business. And what other government business does it do without statistics, without information? The entire the office of the Prime Minister is actually the government itself. So if they do not have all this information, what are we really like? You will not be able to have any iota of trust in such an office, which derives their methods or derives their decisions on people, on hearsay, on feelings, and how other people operate. For example, in Nairobi, they base on statistics to be able to make up certain things. Even when it comes to the lockdown itself, you do not just dictate a lockdown without information, because before you lock down, you need to make sure that you understand the impact to the last person. So if you do not have all that information, you cease to become an effective government. You cease to become efficient in your service delivery. So there is no way, personally, there is no way I can trust that whatever service that they are going to deliver will reach out to the rightful person. If this decision is not mad with the certain ill intentions, very deliberate intentions, there are quite a number of things that we have not dived into, or that we have not seen, that are making discussions in the corridors of the Prime Minister's office, based on certain decisions that they were going to make, which was going to be a blunder.
On Thursday, the Prime Minister made her first distribution of the 100K, and he made it very public. It seemed like a theater or theatrics. Since then, I haven't been able to hear of any other person who has received the 100K. I'm just wondering if there's any more people who have received that money. But this is what happened on Thursday.
It's called Oloya Godfrey.
Trying to put him on speaker.
Yes, but on loudspeaker. There's a mistake. Read for me again.
0753 191 428.
428.
You want to put on loudspeaker?
Yes, loud. Very loud. These people want to record. This is Airtel, eh?
Yeah, that's Airtel.
Follow your answer. That one has missed out. He's sleeping, he's hungry. This man has not seen the message. And we told them to keep... He has answered. Yes, Oloya?
Yes.
This is the Prime Minister of Uganda.
Oh, you're welcome, Honorable Prime Minister.
Have you received the money?
I have received, madam.
Oh, congratulations. How much have you received?
Sorry?
How much have you received on your phone?
I have received a message that I have received 102,425 shillings, Uganda shillings.
The 2,425 shillings is for you, so that when you go to get the 100,000, will be the charge at the outlet. For you are supposed to get 100,000 intact.
Okay.
Thank you so much. What do you do? What do you do?
Sorry?
What do you do for a living?
I'm also a border rider, taxi operator. I just do so many things living.
Thank you.
How did the message come?
Is this cause for celebration? It seems they didn't even know what it seems they didn't even know what Mr. Oloya was doing. Dr. Stella, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Right, I'm kind of disgraced that Muzukulu wa Muswangali is laughing, because for me it's really sad.
No, Stella. Before you go, let me just explain why I'm laughing. I think I'm laughing because I think I don't believe in the antics of what we saw in that video in the first place. I'm very suspicious because I think there's a lot of things that don't add up there. But let me allow you to respond before we come.
Right. So again, I mean, when we started, we talked about leadership, and I talked about women and what women are doing, women leaders in Uganda. And again, a woman, Nabanja, Prime Minister, where very many women are celebrating that she is representing us. I'm appalled. I am appalled at this cry for cheap popularity in the first month of her performance as Prime Minister. She already wants to bribe us with stupidity and nothingness. What is 100,000 shillings today to a Ugandan? But I want to go back to the question that was asked, and I think that George Willobo did a very good job of problematizing how vulnerability was defined, right? Now for me, there are very many holes. Relying on the national identity register is problematic of its own, okay? Very many Ugandans are not registered. Very many others, such as myself, were registered in one area and shifted to another area in another district where we can't have inter-district travel, okay? The national ID registration is flowed with exclusions of people, for example, who did not want to be, who are very suspicious of the registration and thought it was NRM doing its thing. We know from the elections that very many people were excluded from the electoral register and were also excluded from the national ID register. So exclusion of the vulnerable is already happening at that layer, at that level. And then they told us they would also cross-check the national ID with the telephone. The telephone is important for me because I have 10 telephone numbers, okay? 10 telephone numbers. How many are in my name? I will not reveal, okay? What does it mean for somebody to verify and send my 100,000 shilling to a phone number in Uganda? How many of us are getting double? How many are excluded? How many are going to wrong numbers? Okay. And so I think for me that relying on a telephone register is a second layer of problematics and exclusion and double duplication, etc. But for me, I am, you know the number 0753, 191, 428, Oloya's number has become public information. Did he approve? Did he consent? Was he consulted? I have given telephone operators my private information with the hope, with the trust that my private data are private. Suddenly, the government of Uganda is accessing me and my details, etc., etc. Mwezukulu wa Mswangali is a lawyer. And I know that a lot of private data that we have given to the state has crossed into becoming public data. That is a violation. For me, it is a violation of my personal rights as a person who was penalized in Uganda using the Computer Misuse Act. And I found a lot of my private information, my banking information, my lovers' correspondence sprayed on public court screens. Okay, when do our private data become accessible to government, such as Yoweri Museveni's regime? I don't want my private information. I don't even want them to know where I live. And this data can be taken from telephone masts. But now we see a clear crossover. When did the Prime Minister's office get access and permission to use our private data like that? That is wanton abuse. It is rape. Prime Minister and her office, they are raping Ugandans, and we don't want to be raped. But the third issue for me, I think, is having to rely on leaders, our LC leaders, to verify that Nyazi is poor, that I'm vulnerable. I am an unemployed PhD holder. I am an ex-prisoner. I lost the elections. I am a single mother. I have 3 children. Tell me why I'm not a vulnerable poor person. But I'm in Germany, drinking juice, and I don't know what else, okay? How are they excluding a single mom of 3 children, an ex-prisoner, a failed politician? I am totally vulnerably poor. But because I have a gate at my house, and I drive a Toyota Ipsum that we call the war bus, people came to me to say in the first COVID-19 lockdown, Stella Nyanzi, we see you driving your Ipsum. You have some petrol in your tank. You must have food in your kitchen. Give us food, give us food, give us food. And as a mother, I can't see a woman with 3 dirty children coming to my kitchen saying, give us food. If I have porridge, I'll give it to them. I can't see a mother struggling with children and refuse. And so vulnerability must begin also with those of us who are approached every day with begging bowls. You know what happened to Zake? You know what happened to Honorable Zake? When he gave some food to a few people in his constituency, he was beaten almost to death by the police. That is a layer of vulnerability we don't see. The mental health lawyer will say to you that in this time, perhaps the worst vulnerability is people who are dealing with grief, but isolated from their rural communities where we cannot grieve communally. My sister was unfortunate to lose a cousin. They were staying in my mother's house in Masaka. 2 women. My cousin died. All of us siblings were outside Masaka district. So my sister had to organize transport for that one corpse. Single-handedly. We could recruit money. We could send mobile money. We could send advice. But my sister and 3 people traveled with a dead woman, a close relative, to another village. They were held for about 2 hours by the police, who say to them, where are you going? From Chizungu in Masaka to Kalungu. Kalungu is another district. So in terms of vulnerability, the lack of family support, the isolation, even over and beyond food, that can drive a person suicidal, right? So vulnerabilities, I think for me, are very many layers. It's not just about who can have a job, who can work, who cannot work. You talked about testing, Henry. I'm in Germany, where before we go to parties in summer, a person requires that we have a test. Tests are free. You walk into a place, get an RDT. It's a quick test, 15 minutes, free of charge. And I've just been giving my nose to be tested in Germany, and I get the results, and I go. In Uganda, where does a person get a free test? If we cannot track our sick people so as to isolate them and treat them and monitor them, the levels of vulnerability are cross-cutting, that somebody will get an infection and give it to my children, who'll give it to your children, who'll give it to you, you'll give it to another person, who'll give it to another person, who'll give it to another. So vulnerability for illness in a system that cannot afford to test freely, that is vulnerability. So when they're giving 100,000 shillings, what are they doing? They're giving it to men who buy beer, Nile Special, and women who renew their wigs. Okay? What is 100,000 shillings going to do in Uganda today? And so I'm not despising what Nabanja I'm saying is doing. I'm just saying that for me, it's too late. It's too little. She wants popularity. I don't know what she's doing. What are they doing? Who advised them? What is the basis? I mean, Willowbo asked really important questions. What is the basis of giving Umuzukuru wa Muswangali and not Sali? I think a lot of it is very partisan. That if I'm an LC leader and I'm people power and I'm given the roster, I'll first give all my people power guys, or FDC, in my case, all the FDC women. What are the criteria for saying give that person 100,000 shillings and not this one? And I think for me, it's very partisan, it's populist, it's not informed by science. Some of us will get doubles. The most vulnerable will not get, because they don't have funds. Okay, the most vulnerable Ugandans don't have electricity. They don't have funds, right? And also, I think they're going to encourage theft. I would steal your phone if I knew you had that money. If I didn't have, I would steal your phone, okay? And would you hold it against a Ugandan stealing another's phone? Perhaps you wouldn't, because it's the only provision that the government is giving to us. And the last thing I want to say on this note is I can already see a whole ring of thieves waiting to find inroads into that money in the Prime Minister's office. All those people who are seated there, all those ministers, what, and ministers, what, and technical, what, and technical, what. The money that's going to be stolen from just this charade of providing for the vulnerable poor. You wait for the accountability. If ever it comes, wait for the accountability. The ring and racket people are already stealing each other's money using mobile money in Uganda, right? So what's going to happen here? And so I think for me, it's just more problematic. 100,000 shillings is too little. It's nothing. They failed to give us beans and posho. This is already a failed scheme. Like you say, I haven't yet had anybody else who's given, but also 100,000, $25. $25. Like, fuck you, government of Uganda. Keep your $25. And maybe I say that because I can afford, but I think it's an insult to the poverty of Ugandans. It's a real insult to us.
Some people have argued that the 100K is better than the money that was given out in the last COVID wave, the first wave of the pandemic. But I wonder,
apart from a lawyer who has got it, apart from a lawyer, he's the only person we know that has got it. At least I know 5 women who got bad beans. Apart from a lawyer, who else has got this money? How are they going to account for it? 5 people per district, and then they tell us 500,000 Ugandans got money. For crying out loud, we are 40 million. We are 40 million, and most of us are below the $1 a day rate that they give us.
Mr. Muswangali, Muzukuru wa Muswangali.
First of all, I want to correct the impression, because obviously I started off this session by blowing off a huge laugh because of the comedy that we've been kind of introduced to in one of the clips, and it's hilarious. That's all I could say. But I think in a funny way, sometimes when you're going through a rough time, when you're going through a hard period like the one we are going under, maybe sometimes it's nice to have a laugh, because it kind of blows you away and kind of gives you some kind of
Mr. Sentongo Spire calls them the uncomfortable laughs.
Absolutely. Seriously, when I saw that clip, I laughed, just as I've laughed now, because I think it's comedy of the highest order. And I think, as Stella just rightly put words out of my mouth right there straight away, there is a straightforward element of data breach there. There's even no question about that. Recently, I'm in a platform, and I'm in a different platform, and there's a service provider, Best in Uganda, provides a service to a very large section of people, and he wanted to communicate certain changes, following these changes in internet production and stuff like that. They wanted to provide some kind of specific, information about how services will be changing going forward, and they they spread email addresses of hundreds and hundreds of people in the community, including their contact numbers, email addresses and contact numbers. And somebody went back to the company and said to them, look, what you're doing is absolutely wrong, because you are not even sure whether everybody on this platform would like their public data, public information, and private information to be shared and used and processed in such a manner, which is what has happened here. Because we don't know, did Mr. Oloya agree to the government, providing his personal information in such a manner? What if somebody has got interest in him? Maybe he's running away from data, or maybe he's got somebody that he doesn't want to find out where he is, and there is all his public, his personal number is spread. I even have it here myself, 07531914428. I wrote it down as the minister, as the prime minister was reading it out. So there is that lack of sensitivity from that point on. But I would like to say that I think the gesture is good. The gesture of trying to reach out for those who are perceived or considered to be vulnerable or perceived to be needy. The gesture is good. Obviously, as you did put it, I think the metrics, the method that has been used, to come to those conclusions is really questionable. And as we know, in our experience, this is not the first time. I think we are entitled to become to be suspicious at every point, given what we've consistently seen that has been happening in these institutions, because you really don't know. I mean, the sort of people that you see there are very, very eager to clap, even before they know possibly the sorts of things that the prime minister is going to say, the recipient on the other end. As soon as the phone call goes through, as soon as the phone call goes live, you see people eager to clap without even knowing what is going to be the subject of the discussion between the prime minister and the caller. I think for me that raises questions about the legitimacy of that call, whether it was a setup, whether it was some kind of pre-arranged kind of concept, to bring the masses on, to tell them that, hey, look here, we have begun the process, money is now available, and people are beginning to receive the money. And of course, as everybody is asking, it's really interesting to understand or to get some testimonies from people who have had that money so far. Because for those of us who are here, and not only myself, but I'm sure even you guys and Stella has hinted on it, we continue to receive, requests for assistance, from relatives and friends and people that sometimes we don't even know. And they are continuing to reach out to you to request for assistance, for very small sums of money. Of course, the round off becomes really big, because if you consider you've got to help maybe 10, 15 people or so many, at the end of the week, you can imagine how much money you would have spent out of your pocket. So I think the concept is good, but it needs to be well targeted to the people who are really in need.
What is puzzling for me is the fact that at the end of towards the end of the conversation, she inquires from the receiver what the receiver actually does. What do you do? In countries like Canada, for example, before you get any kind of government assistance, the government is going to know what you're doing and why you actually deserve that money. Do you deserve that money? Should we be giving that money? The fact that the prime minister was inquiring from the receiver after he had already received the money, what he was doing, makes me wonder how they decided that he was a vulnerable person to receive that kind of money. But I want us to wrap up this segment before we interrogate the last segment. And I want to give Mr. Willobo an opportunity to wrap up this segment.
Yes, I'll actually submit from your conclusion of your submission there. You see why they were asking that. It really signifies a lot. It shows you that the basics of methodology or standards in terms of data was not met at all. Actually, they do not know who received what. when I was in the private sector managing certain projects, the best way that you need to present to a donor for funding or for money, to release money, you need to first of all know the 4 W's and then the H. The what, which of course is the $100, the when you're going to give them, where, and who receives the money, but how do they receive this money? So if all these aspects were the basic aspects were not even met, by the time a prime minister, the person of the prime minister is on live TV and making a blunder of even like, that's an ignorant blunder of not even having a clue of who you're going to call, what you're going to call. Even if they wanted to really make this call and create a perception in the population, they would predetermine that. They would rehearse it, at least, for lack of better words. They would have rehearsed it and made it clear to know who this person was and how it is. And they wanted to make it crude, of course, but the crudeness showed quite a lot of gaps in their approach. My conclusion is that most of our misleadership is actually a handful of individuals that are influence peddling certain activities or certain well-intentioned programs and activities of the government. And some of these people they're hidden and they influence, much as we look at Nabanja as a prime minister, but there is a wheel that rotates Nabanja. And that wheel, it's until when that wheel gets out of the way, that's when we may have any form of good governance. Otherwise, the governance systems that we have as a country, even when you bring the least quantification of how much we have as governance as a country, it's actually the rational portions are quite very small. So I would in fact rely on the fact that most of our leaders require some form of because where they have reached, they no longer need capacity building, because some of them are vulnerable mentally themselves. So I would simply say this, and directly, if there is any government officials that you are tagged in this kind of platform, is that we must go back to the basics and stand out for the norms and values that we believe in, the integrity that we exhibit to the population. Because even when you are holding an office and the population regards you as ignorant, it does you more harm. You may feel very proud and create a theatrical kind of a show, as we have seen, but there is a rigor that they take you to be. And in fact, this goes to the women empowerment kind of gestures that they are trying to show us. If you looked at the background, there are so many, there are women that are really backing her up, making they are the cheerleaders of the entire announcements that she was making. But are this going to be the norm? Is this going to be the norm, or we need to bring brain power onto the table and make sure that we put some of these some of the criteria that are really tested into practice? We must be able to go back to the basics and understand how certain things operate so that we can be able to deliver effectively.
Right. I think that's a very good sum up of that segment.
Stella seems to be wanting to say something.
I want to give Stella an opportunity to respond, because someone who is watching us online, Mr. Kagame Kenneth, says that Stella is exaggerating challenges. Dr. Stella, are you exaggerating that?
Right. So I was smiling when Willabo mentioned brain power, because I'm wearing a T-shirt that says "Pussy Power," and it celebrates women and pussy. Meow. But I'm not exaggerating challenges. I think that what I wanted to say quick response to Kenneth Kagame is that there are different ways of doing brain power, and sometimes exaggeration is a consciously chosen style to emphasize an issue. That sometimes we must exaggerate for people to realize there's a problem. Is the exaggeration called for? In my case, it is. If you have a problem, sue me. Mitala Muzukulu wa Muswangali will defend me and they will get me out of court. But I don't think it's a crime. No, just to say very quickly that women as cheerleaders, I think again that the question, the very same question can be said about the young men. You know, I saw a lot of potential. I think technocrats, people who know how to operate IT and the telephones and SIM cards and money transfer. And it is sad that Ugandans' brain power, youthful energy is being utilized in such abusive ways that youthful brains and talent are being deployed for this theatrical performance that makes those of us grieving laugh. And I'm sure that Muzukulu wa Muswangali was not laughing because he's humored or pleasured. He was laughing because the other alternative would be to cry. But we cannot just cry about stuff. I think that if the money comes to your phone, use it. Baby, use it. When the ringtone comes, I don't know how it's coming. Use that money because it is our money. As we said in the first segment, money has been borrowed on the account of Ugandans. And if you don't get money, please go and have some protest action saying, Nabanja, we have not yet got our money. When the food never came in 2020, women from the streets, women from homes, and young people in universities who were stuck at Makerere joined me in a protest. And the police arrested us, but our message went to the whole world that Ugandans protested about food. So if the money doesn't come from Nabanja, please organize yourselves and protest. You can ban telephone use because telephones are being used to give us the money. But I was told to just interject a little. I wasn't invited to make a long submission.
I know it was just an interjection. I wonder if Mr. Muswangal, are you ready, Mr. Muswangal, are you ready to defend Stella?
Absolutely. Why not? I mean, when I used to work on radio, I used to say to my listeners that my job was there to, you know, to make the debate emotive, because when you make it emotive, it challenges people actually to think beyond, you know, a certain domain. So absolutely, and for me, I've stated it here on record. I've never been I've never been ashamed by anything that Stella does. I think she's got her method. The method is working, and it's getting her the recognition. People are noticing what she's saying, and everything she says. Not everything she says is with no reason. I mean, if you listen to her, most of the proposals she comes up with, you know, are better than the people who criticize her. So for me, there's no problem for me there. But if it's my turn to conclude, I'm just going to say very briefly that I think this week has been a let-off in some ways, because I think in the last 4 or 3 or so many weeks, there has been lots of reported deaths coming from Uganda to a point that it was really, really concerning. It's not to say that it's not concerning. Lots of people have lost lives. Families are being disrupted. Livelihoods are being disrupted. But there seems to be an ease of, and I'm hoping that I'm not giving false hope to people, but it does appear that there's been
I hope you're not concluding the conversation.
Yeah.
I hope you're just giving some interjection to that.
Absolutely. We'll carry on from there. I thought I was concluding because but let's carry on. Let's carry on, Henry.
Yeah, I think that there's one more aspect of this COVID-19 crisis that we need to discuss. Of course, we all know that we are keeping the government accountable. As the public, we are trying to do our job. We are trying to leave the spaces that Mr. Besigye has put all of us in, which is the spaces of naivety, I guess. The spaces where he has said that we are stupid, the space where he has emphasized that we are inactive. I think this is the space that Dr. Stella is trying to tell each and every Ugandan to do something. Do something. Stop just believing everything what the government tells you. Interrogate issues, examine them, and act. If the issues are not working in your favor, act. There is, as we conclude the issue of the 100. The 100K to citizens. I think I want to acknowledge some artists who have acted even when they are doing humorous things to try and put some of these issues to light and try to show us that we are in a space where we need to do more than just criticize government, but keep the government actually accountable to ensure that it works for the people. We do have an opposition right now. The main opposition is the National Unity Platform. I need to know from you guys, are they doing enough? Is the opposition doing enough? Of course, when I say the opposition, I mean the entire opposition, including FDC, UPC, DP. But the reason why I am fronting the NUP is because the NUP is the leading opposition group in Uganda now. But before we talk about that, and I want Stella to start this conversation, I want you to see this, and perhaps you can derive your thoughts from that conversation.
Kakati bano mukole mugumiikirize esente naku tebanatuweereza ssente naye ssente baba baziweereza ngenda kuzikuweereza nawe direct. Abaana ogiro bawo obuugi kale abaana ogiro bawo obuugi bagumi esente baba bazimpeereza tufera tulinze essimu ya nabbanja wonalebo nabbanja kale mukulu sekikusu muganda nge soko lindeko nine simu gyeninze y'amaanyi wano tujja kuddamu twogere kale osobola okubira mu nesimu sawa zino fena amaaso gatuli ku masimu ngawo oddamu kunkubira mbombuuza bwe nasuze bwenti nasuze ebintu baga nasuze bubi ngo oli musawo gyonzijanja. Halo wanjinya onani nabbanja mama nsanyisa okuwuliza maama egyebaleko mama munange nkugambe nti onalebe nkugambe nti munange nti ndi bulungi nga tesiri bulungi embeera munange ogiraba ndi kakati buli kimu kifu nkubuulira era waka nze ndiwonze kago embeera munange ate endya abaana embyaloze endya munange endya mbi era fena munange mbale tulinde kasimuko ani nabbanja ki ekangulumira nabbanja mulabase gwe kiwala gweru ani gwokubira essimu tumbaavu ndiwona nimukwererejja ndowooza ani afudde kati serifuusa baba afudde nze namuse nze gwokubira tontabanya naawe nina essimu ezamagezi enina ngaoddamu kungwera sawa zino muziike gwotayima esobola kusala kujja bugerere tomanyi nti boda bazigala tosobola kuva mu disitulikiti ndala mumbikira nkole ntya genda eri.
Is this the state where our people have reached? Dr. Stella, as you what the opposition has done so far, what alternatives has the opposition offered?
Right. So I mean, I celebrate comedy and humor and all tools that we can use to send a message home. And so I celebrate those comedians with you. I mean, sometimes when situations are dire, our only response is humor. And I think that for me, humor or inviting others to laugh with me has carried me through some of the darkest times. It is very attractive, very sexy to criticize and penalize and find lacking NUP. As a member of FDC and a sworn critique of all those who hold power, it would be very easy for me to fall for the trap of criticizing NUP in this moment. However, I am very aware that I am implicated in the failings of NUP because I am in the opposition, right? To delegate and relegate the duty of opposition only to NUP is to be irresponsible. As a person who is a sworn critique of dictator Museveni and his dictatorship, I don't need a party and party affiliation to continue criticizing and bringing Yoweri Museveni and his regime of thieves and murderers to accountability. If NUP is the face that is leading the political formation in parliament that call themselves opposition, I don't think that necessarily gives me an opportunity or an excuse to sit down and cross my legs and wait to see what NUP does. And so I'm among the people who think that party politics is important in terms of organizing us for elective office, right? And I appreciate parties and I appreciate the role of NUP as a young party that is in parliament. We have seen them giving a hard time to ministers in parliament, right? As a member of the opposition, as a woman with a loud mouth, as an educated Ugandan, as a person who has very many platforms, it is my duty, as much as it is the duty of NUP members, and as much as it is the duty of any responsible Ugandan or anybody who has a heart for Uganda, whether they're in the country or outside the country, what we are demanding for NUP to do is a demand on ourselves as well. So if I say that NUP has not done a good job of making Yoweri Museveni accountable, of making the hospital down the road accountable, of making ministers and accountants and rich men responsible enough for Ugandan individuals and communities, I blame myself as well. Has NUP done enough? No. Have I done enough? No. Have Ugandans with privilege done enough? No, we haven't done enough. Are we organizing ourselves better to make the government more accountable? No. Okay. And I think that it is high time that we got away from the NUP, FDC, UPC, DP divisions and quickly re-strategized in ways to utilize our different privilege and abilities and expertise to bring the government to accountability. It can no longer be just about NUP. There are questions I would have for NUP if I was seated in NUP, but I'm not seated in NUP. It is not my responsibility. I think that when it comes to the COVID-19 crisis, as a Ugandan with privilege, I speak English, I have internet, I can write, I can organize, I can fundraise. There's so many things I can offer to an anti-COVID-19 movement demanding accountability. I don't need to wait for NUP to do that work. So sorry, Henry Sali, sir, I'm not answering your question about has NUP done enough. I think that if NUP has not done enough, have I done enough? Have you done enough? Has the next person who feels that NUP has not done enough, what have you done to bridge the gap and fill the gap that NUP has created? NUP is not my business. I did not vote NUP into power. I voted FDC, right?
Yeah,
and I would make FDC responsible. I think that my party, for the large part, has sat down and is still grieving from the loss of the election.
I know, but when is the grieving going to end? And the reason why I made NUP as the umbrella for the opposition is because, first of all, it's the umbrella of the opposition. But secondly, they are NUP affiliated bloggers who have been saying that people shouldn't go to the hospitals in Uganda. And there's that movement that thinks that taking vaccination in Uganda is detrimental to the health of Ugandans. So as opposition, where are you sitting in educating or creating awareness to all Ugandans that taking vaccinations could be helpful rather than detrimental to their health?
Listen, Henry, before we even block each other up as the opposition, there isn't anything called a united opposition in Uganda. It's not there. So you can't say the opposition is saying this because you gave us an example of strong FDC man Kizza Besigye being on the front line, right? And I think that very many of us, based on our backgrounds with either vaccines or medicine or community organizing or science, that we know that vaccines are a necessity. I mean, the question of vaccines is a question that should bring us back. The abuse in the name of vaccines and the lack in the name of vaccines and the fake vaccines and the reason why there is not enough trust in our government in the name of vaccines is an important question. When people say, I'm not going, there are very many reasons for suspicion that have been given to us by the public performance of the leaders in power, the misleaders in power. But I want to say that we cannot talk about a homogeneous, unified, harmonized opposition when it comes to the COVID-19 situation. That's why I think that for me, we need to organize. We need to start organizing. The question about the opposition is, what have we done? And of course, for me, it's very easy to say, but Dr. Kizza Besigye is speaking well on behalf of FDC. What are the other members of FDC doing? What are the DP doing? What are the other people who are not in political parties in Uganda, but believe in the liberation struggle? What are we doing? We cannot fight the liberation struggle when we are dead. Okay, we can't. And so I think that, like I said, I think I've said, this is the third time I'm saying it, that COVID-19 offers us an opportunity to organize as Ugandans for a better Uganda, outside from our political parties. I think that the bloggers who are, so I believe in freedom of expression, right? As a scientist, I also believe that denialism sometimes is the basis upon which new discoveries are made. I believe it's important to debate and question, but I also believe in responsibility as a person who has a platform that that has very many people who come either to learn or argue, disagree. And so I don't think that anybody should tell anyone to stop saying what they have to say. Vaccine denialists exist. We cannot silence them. I believe in freedom of expression, and freedom of expression is exactly that. What I think should happen is that we should then, those of us who believe in science and who believe in vaccines and who believe in education must educate the bloggers. So that
research, exactly. What have we done? What have you done as people in the opposition to educate, to create awareness, to lead people to research facilities?
And Henry, the first thing I've said we should do is to organize, because there's no organized opposition. If there's going to be there are people who still debate with Dr. Kizza Besigye's nutrition regime of garlic and honey and ginger and God knows whatever else. There are others who argue against use of masks. There are those who believe that we shouldn't stay home. We should be exposed and get herd immunity. So there isn't one uniform voice about preventing COVID-19 in Uganda, be it opposition or the regime, right? And so even before you say, what have you done to educate? Who is educating? If a fool from NUP or FDC, if a COVID denialist from FDC, my party, is teaching, they will teach dangerously, in my opinion, right? And so I think that before we even say what has the opposition done, we should organize around science and knowledge, because COVID-19 is going to be fought with science and knowledge and vaccine information. Immunologists and virologists must come on board. It's a very specific expertise. It's an expert field. I can't sit from my kitchen and start getting a syllabus or curriculum for what to tell bloggers, right? So we don't even have a unified position from our medics. Take the example of COVIDX, or is it COVIDX? Yeah. The herb that is now supposed to be a popular herb. I am skeptical about COVIDX. I have people in my family who are giving very good reports about COVIDX, because I believe in research around pharmacologies and like vaccines and things like that, and medicine. I don't know what to think about COVID. So if you told me to tell bloggers something in the spirit of boo-boo, buy Ugandan, be Ugandan, I might promote COVID. As a scientist, I still have questions. I don't know whether it's gone through phase 4 clinical, the phase 1 clinical trials or phase 4 for community acceptability. I don't know. And I'm a scientist before I am a boo-boo person. So I don't think we're at that point where we can say, what are we telling bloggers from our side to say? We don't even know what to say. Right? So I think that public education, political education, consciousness raising does not start from danger. We have to first agree on what to give before we give people poison as food, right? What is the menu we are cooking? We haven't agreed on the ingredients of the meal. We don't even know who's going to cook. Will FDC cook and NUP eat? Can we have a united front where Bobby Wine is singing messages that have been packaged by Chiza Besigye working in consortium with who are the others? Whoever, right? And so I think that we are not yet organized as a unit called the opposition. And so even just having a message from NUP might already sideline FDC, or FDC might sideline NUP. And I think it is premature to say, what are we telling bloggers to say if we haven't organized a united front?
So what do you think Socrates would think about the notion of choosing what is right over what is good? And in this case, when you talk about, do you think silence is better than caution?
Who are you asking, me or Mitala?
I'm asking you.
No, I think because it is difficult to silence me, right? When I know it's right, I speak. And I think for me, because lives are involved, I was telling people to get vaccines when they were available. I remember organizing 4 of my friends to go to Mengo Hospital, and the morning they went and they stood in the line. There were 2 people ahead of my friend before the vaccines got finished. And so what does it mean to tell people to go for vaccines that are not available, right? And so Uganda is a very difficult country in which to even know what to tell people. I wasn't saying, what do you tell people? I organized these women. I took them from their private lives. 1 works in a shop, 2 are hair salonists, and 1 is a stay-at-home mother. I got for them a car, and they went to Mengo Hospital. They stood in the line. They woke up and they were there by about 6. So 5, the pickup began at 5, and they got there, and Mengo, which was offering free vaccines, took 2 people ahead of my first friend. The vaccine ran out. So what do I teach people? Do I say to them, vaccines are good, but we don't have them in Uganda? Do I say to people, vaccines are good, go and get the first dose, you won't get the second dose? What do I say to them? I say to them, demand for vaccines. Make sure the government gives us vaccines. Demand that vaccines are given to us freely. Demand that we don't get expired vaccines, but I cannot be responsible for an irresponsible government, which is supposed to supply us. So what Socrates says, Socrates can stick whatever he says up wherever he wants to stick it. I think that in the Ugandan situation, we speak because we must speak, but what we say is very much determined by a failing government. And what do you tell people in a failing government? We rely on the government to provide. So what do you say? I don't know. It's a difficult question. And I think for me, my duty is to raise the questions and raise more questions around the questions and never to provide an answer. That's what good scholars do. So now I'm being a good scholar, not a good organizer.
Mr. Vitala, your response to that?
At the beginning of the pandemic, one of the biggest problems that every country had to fight was misinformation about causes of COVID, the spread of COVID, and so on and so forth. I remember here in the UK, there was this theory that COVID was caused by, this new technology. I think 5 technology, that the masks that 5G. 5G technology, that the masks that were being put up by telecommunication companies, to provide 5G internet connectivity, that's where, they were spreading COVID and so on and so forth. And I saw lots of commentary on that, from various, bloggers across the globe in the United States, wherever they're coming from. People, you see, this internet is a good thing, but it's also a dangerous place to be. So I think what I would say is that there is a personal responsibility on each and every individual to make sure that, when you have a platform, as Stella has said, you only stand out to give information that is kind of well researched. You can have an opinion, but even when you have an opinion, it's good to base an opinion on reasonable research so that you don't appear to be, talking and speaking, ignorantly. Because otherwise, what that does to you is to injure your credibility to the point that you will speak and people will just look at you and say, what is this talking about? What's this person talking about? So there is that problem. Now, in terms of linking the so-called bloggers that you referred to the body and politics of opposition, entities. I'm just wondering that whether these people, are they formally speaking on behalf of particular opposition parties or particular opposition figures, or are they just propelling their own, their own opinions on their own platforms? Because obviously, for instance, here in the UK, we've got established political parties like the Labour Party, like the Conservative Party, the Green Party, and so on and so forth. And so many people subscribe to these organizations. People have got opinions. But I think until when somebody is speaking formally on behalf of an establishment, like for instance, if Stella came here and she said that she's speaking specifically on behalf of FDC, then whatever she says on those grounds begin to bind the FDC because she's speaking on behalf of them. But if Stella is here as an FDC supporter, but just talking about different issues in her own perception, how she says things, I think it would be very difficult for us to pin Stella's opinions on the opinion of the body and politics of the FDC as a political party. So I think that's where there is a bit of a difference there. But I think what I would like to emphasize...
A regular citizen in Uganda thinks about bindingness of people, a person's comment, or formality.
They are people who have authority when they speak, based either on maybe.
I know, but authority is not necessarily official. Authority doesn't have to be official.
What I mean in that sense, Henry, is that there are people whose voices are respected when they speak to the public. The public want to listen to them because they consider them to be reasonable people. They consider them to be informed people. Therefore, the public is persuaded to follow a particular individual because they believe in what that person is saying. It's like you on a platform where people believe that, all right, if this guy is saying something, it's probably right somewhere, and you might find that people will follow you because of that. That's the kind of authority that I'm referring to. So,
yes, what if that voice that offers that authority or influence is the one voice that is also spreading misinformation? What do you do then?
Well, that's what I started with, Henry. That we have a personal responsibility to make sure that we do not misinform people, because the reality of the matter is that in this situation, they are real. The people's lives are at stake. If you make a mistake, either deliberately or just negligently, just because you want to be seen in a particular, angle, and you're putting out false information there, and people rely on that information, you are, in a way, you are committing murder. And I think that is something that shouldn't really sit well with somebody who is really, of a reasonable character. I think that's what I would say on that. So misinformation is really a crucial thing. I mean, Stella has made something here. I'm vaccinated here. I took 2 injections at the very beginning in March this year. And I've been one of the key people who have actually been putting myself across as an example, telling people that you people, while you say that the vaccines are not safe, there is a good example. I am here. I took 2 vaccines and nothing has changed in my life. I'm okay, and actually I feel more safer going out in the public, because and it doesn't mean to say that because you are vaccinated you won't get infected by a virus, but at least by and large I feel safer going out to the members of the public. When I meet people, I openly say to them, look, I'm vaccinated, and I think that gives them some kind of safety kind of network. And on that basis, I've promoted that idea, and trying to persuade the people back home, that vaccines are not a bad thing. But then, just 1 minute, as Stella is just asked that very key question there, in this kind of climate today, how do you go back and look somebody in the face and tell them that, look here, mommy, look here, brother, look here, sister, go and get a vaccine? How do you seriously do that, knowing the sorts of things that we know today? So, one final comment on that, a link to this whole issue about what the opposition can do. I saw the leader of the opposition. I think he was trying to go out in the public to try to go and sensitize masses about being extra careful and taking following the standard operating procedures and so forth. And the police stopped him going to the markets to be able to promote that kind of message. So there is another problem that the opposition is so disabled in a sense that the government is still looking at this whole business as a political game. And as long as they continue to look at this problem as a political game, we may not achieve very much. Because where you are not allowing people to go, because it's not only government that has got that freedom to go out and spread their message. I mean, even members of the opposition equally has a right as the opposition to go and put out their own message, but it doesn't look like the space is even for them to be able to do things of that kind. So there is a problem there, and I don't know how it can be resolved. My final observation will simply be that everybody should take personal responsibility to make sure that the sorts of things that you talk about are well researched. I would rather go with science.
I think you both make a good points in terms of first of all, Stella saying that we should no one should be empowered, too much empowered to censor people's views or ideas, and I think those ideas are also stemming from some sort of place of reference where people in Uganda who have had 2 jabs of vaccinations have also passed on. So I think some people have reason to think the way they think about things, but we live in a world of contestation of ideas, and I think it's good for us to have these debates that actually closely examine these different facets or concepts that are being interrogated in this area. So in that way, we also need to question the practices of our health personnel in Uganda. How are they storing the vaccination? Is the storing leading to bad vaccinations, and is that bad vaccinations being administered on different patients, and that's why people are ending up dead? Or is the vaccination being forged? Or as we discussed in previous conversations, and how does a common person distinguish between a legit vaccination and a forged vaccination? So this is a complicated conversation, but I want to give George Willoughby the final say on this conversation.
Well, Mr. Henry, at the time that this is a time that is really critical in terms of public health, and any information that has to trickle down to the public must be backed by very authentic scientific proof and evidences. So with that regard, we may have some information as conspiracy theories, and it may not be very important and good for the public, and will also be actually held accountable for the same. However, you may not prevent the conspiracy theorists to also flourish with their ideologies and stuff like that. But I want to shift this conversation, the submissions of my 2 colleagues, to the fact that our Ugandan population is driven by perceptions, and the perceptions always determine what the population takes as the truth and lies. And whatsoever that is on the public domain view would be making conversations and sets precedence for what the public will be able to look at. Now, I love what Dr. Kiza Besigye is doing. Wholesomely, he's representing a very serious sect of the political divide in terms of opposition. But he is also speaking with a very serious moral authority as a medical doctor. So whatever that he mentions or talks about, is well informed of the same. And what we have as a perception in Uganda also for our political leaders is a little bit very unfair with the fact that even our political leaders these days do not know their roles in the society or in the communities that they lead. That's where now you see people and MPs going out to buy ambulances, constructing hospitals and all the other things, because people, they have lost their actual roles based on the fact that the perception in the community and in the society has changed. There is a paradigm shift of understanding the role of a political leader in the capacity of, let's say, an MP. But also there is that injustice that is that has been carved within the political atmosphere of opposition, where we have branded individuals of individual leaders as the centerpiece of opposition, of power and all this. That's the same way that Museveni has led Uganda. But rather, if you look at the approach of what the opposition can do is provide an alternative policy, an alternative measures, an alternative even when it may be rejected, but can we see the minority alternative that the cabinet, the shadow cabinet, can come out with and look at and present it to the Prime Minister's office, and we consider it to be an alternative of approach that they should have done, for that matter. Just as we would recognize that the role of the shadow cabinet is to always have or hold the government at check at every levels. Can we be able to see a shadow cabinet report that can stipulate the actual alternative approach to some of these things we are discussing here today? And if that is done, can we be able to consider that now our leaders are really working their best, instead of lamentations and lamenting on issues that they would have an alternative to? For me, that's where my issue would be, because in most cases, some of the things that we have discussed here, in one way or the other, it has a political side of it. And in everything that we are going to look at, politicization of politicizing the COVID-19 pandemic in Uganda is something that it's not actually coincidence, but it's what every government does. Most of the moment you anything that concerns with the public, politics has to jump in automatically. And the worst thing that our government has at the center of focus is holding power. And the government looks at any good sensitization programs that will be presented, or ideologies that will be presented from any opposing political side, as a threat to information, to dissemination of information to the public, and in turn, of course, thinking that the public will be able to take into account the person that is disseminating the information and providing whatsoever that they're providing, and this is a threat to the government. And being that, we end up having whatever that we are having, where people are not consulted, where decisions are made at at a high-end office without any consideration of who is receiving the services. Because in all due respect to Stella Nyanzi and FDC party, I believe that the political party called FDC created the biggest opposition structure Uganda has ever had in since pre-colonial times. But the challenge that we currently have as an infiltration in regards to answering the things of the bloggers, we have very many political, what I can call political adolescents in the picture. The political adolescents in the names of, let's say, the bloggers and people who do not really understand how state operate, how politics how their opinions play part in the political decisions of the country, have mingled everything up to create so many issues to the extent that they are now more of propaganda than even opinions that may matter. That's why when we are making such submissions here, and you have tagged maybe these political leaders, they would pick out of very many words that we've said. There should be something that they would pick. There should be something that we teach our people, or someone will learn from it. And this is what is lacking, where most of our leaders have only lamented on the government decisions, but they have not created any alternatives on the table.
Right. And that was my question initially. What alternatives has the opposition offered Ugandans? Perhaps they might have good alternatives that the government will pick them up, just like Chiza Besigye initially discredited the head tax to the extent that the government ended up scrapping it altogether. I wonder if any of you wants to rebuttal that in 1 minute as we close this conversation.
Henry, just very quickly to say that in 2020, when the first lockdown happened, FDC put together ambulances because one of the problems was transporting COVID positive or people who suspected they had COVID to health centers or hospitals. And I remember that a number of individuals in the party gave their vehicles and drivers were trained, and these vehicles were going to act as emergency ferry transport from the homes of infected persons to hospital. What the government did was to total ban on FDC emergency transport. And so that, I don't know if it was Muzukuru wa Muswangali or Willobo who mentioned the disempowering conscious disabling of opposition. So while Willobo is saying, offer alternative policy of alternative programs, what I want to say is that Yoweri Museveni's dictatorship does not care about Ugandans, because one of the things they would have done is to put Chiza Besigye and other specialists in the opposition who are health experts at health and vaccinology and immunology and virology and pandemic control, put them in the COVID-19 task force, right? But that hasn't happened. Anything that's coming from the alternative, particularly from FDC, is very quickly criminalized and penalized. I mean, look, the easy example that was done by a number of both NUP and FDC MPs was giving food, just food donations to people. And that was criminalized. It was called attempted murder, and we saw people who were actually arrested and beaten up. And so what I think for me is that Yoweri Museveni is looking at this as a war. He said COVID-19 is a war. But he's not just fighting the virus, he's also fighting opposition. We are part of the enemy that have to be fought, and our solutions are part of the problem he has, because we could get popular. And so Willobo's proposal is good as theory. In practice in Uganda, it will not work. It is not very popular because Yoweri Museveni sees the opposition and any alternative options to what his dictatorship is offering as a challenge, as an invitation to war, and he beats up people militarily Yeah, he punishes anyone who gets an alternative. But it's not to lose hope. And like you said, there are people who are doing things, education, especially education, I think. What we can do as the opposition is mainly do education and campaign.
Mr. Mitala Muzukulu wa Muzonga, do you have a rebuttal for that? For Mr. Willoughby's suggestion?
It's not even a rebuttal of some sort, but I think if you look at the example of Dr. Besigye, and this is one of the things that we've been saying consistently, that you need to let people who have got the technical know-how and knowledge to be able to do to take center stage in areas where they are best suited to be able to perform and come up with creative ideas on how to deal with these sorts of emergencies. And again, Besigye has mentioned it very well. He made very good references to how he thought the pandemic should have been dealt with, and take the politics out of it, but empower the people who have got the knowledge and the experience of dealing with issues of such a kind to be able, to create solutions and ideas for the country to pull out of this situation. But ultimately, what we do still have is politics, and without that being resolved, then everything that you say, regardless of what your intentions are, you become an enemy. And in that kind of space, I think the opposition can achieve very, very little, other than as Stella said, just carrying on with the education. But I'm happy with what I'm seeing from those who can. Take the example of Sejirinya, in his individual capacity, and he's taking all the initiatives that he's taking. Anybody can describe them to be whatever they is, gimmicks or whatever, but they are practical, and he's offering something for that can be of benefit to the people, in however small it is, but it's a demonstration. It's an example of how all politicians or all those who have got the privilege to be able to do things like that can be able to, deploy that kind of help, so that our communities can be assisted, to escape, the sad and dire situations we find ourselves in. But on the overall, I think let the technocrats take center stage and let the politicians step away from this. This is what all governments have done elsewhere. All governments that have decided to play politics, they have not ended up very well. Even in Tanzania, next to us, when there was a change of government, you've seen a clear change of direction. Right. And I think the president in Tanzania has now kind of taken a backstage and allowed the technocrats to come in, and I think they are dealing with the situation possibly a lot better than what we are seeing in our own situation. But I think that's my overall observation on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure hosting you. It's been a pleasure having you back, Dr. Stella. Always the state of the nation conversation. These conversations never end. I think this is
you have to say to Stella that she was greatly missed here. This is where she belongs.
I know. I did tell her.
This business of going away and befriending other people is not welcome here. This is where you were supposed to be.
Thank you for the love. I feel loved and welcomed back. A lot depends on internet. When I don't come, blame Museveni. Museveni is to be blamed for everything bad.
Thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure hosting you again. This is the State of the Nation. Henry Sally is my name.
This is the State of the Nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate. We are reasonable, we are uncensored. The State of the Nation with Henry Sally.